So, what kind of trade do we need to work out for this Galnet link? Rix asked.
Given that it is likely no more than a simple matter and energy feed to the auto-fabricator, similar to the onboard portable printer, I do not expect there to be any request for trade, Mundo said.
The pair were back aboard the Esperanto, and Rix had the gravity set to his normal, which meant that the walking frame wasn't going much of anywhere in a hurry. Got a plan to trade. It's wrong to expect help and not have anything to offer in trade, at least if it's non-essential.
What did you have in mind? Mundo prompted.
I guess I was thinking about maybe some data files, maybe some Terran entertainment, Rix said, and appeared to think further. Nah, given her reaction, Terran entertainment would probably be like watching an ultra-horror movie.
I would concur with that assessment, but I am unable to confirm as to why that would be, given the limited information regarding Quinn, Mundo said, rebrowsing the guide to Quinn in the background.
So, what is a Quinn? The station master, she, right? Rix started, hands frozen in the air mid-gesture, waiting for the confirmation room from the walking frame. She's like a kind of bird, right? Mundo took a moment to compare this particular word against the lexicon of the Terran. Interestingly, Blinn was both a feathered avian being and, to refer to the guide and the lexicon simultaneously, a beautiful female type of the Quinn.
In a manner of speaking, that is not an entirely incorrect assessment. It is exceedingly simplified, and I would advise caution in describing Station Master Blinn as such. While I have no reason to suppose that such language would necessarily be considered a slur, there is a non-zero chance that it would be construed as such, Mundo replied.
Rix appeared to be thoughtful for a few moments. Weird though, meeting a Xeno and she's a Quinn.
Please explain how this situation is weird, as you describe it.
I never really figured I'd meet a full sapient Xeno. Offer wallabies, Xenohounds, even some oshers like critters and Prixia. It just never seemed like a real possibility, what with all the worlds we've already settled. Rix shrugged and leaned back.
Based on the available information I have retained, given the size of space and the normal time continuum of a species, as well as the great filters, it was by virtue of Terran intervention that a number of species have reached the stars, having been elevated artificially, to even coexist within the same, similar time frame. Mundo flashed the room for entropic demise, which Rix took a moment to look up.
So, what'd you get a Quinn? Especially one who lives this far out? Rix eventually asked.
Given the information provided by the station databases, I believe some simple Quinn amenities would be welcome. Failing that, I do not have any suggestions.
Well, given all the concern over germs and viruses and the like, we probably don't want to wander around too many people unless we have to, Rix nodded.
It may be possible for me to collect some samples from you and have Blinn scan them to determine if any biological concerns arise between naturally occurring biochemistries, as well as microorganisms, Mundo suggested.
What good would that do? Rix asked.
It would allow me to establish a baseline for healthy microorganisms within your system, as well as providing a baseline between whether you can be around others without a sterilization field, Mundo explained.
So I don't get sick, or so they don't?
Both of those are potential outcomes. I would advise you to recall similar cases within your own species, since it is a sufficiently common issue without being compounded by stasis utilization.
Then they have some kind of supermeds to protect them?
Rick seemed to be joking, but then flashed a room for serious inquiry. I cannot speak to that. The medical system on board this station is fairly basic, and possesses some medication templates, but nothing that I would suppose as being a cure-all, if I'm interpreting this lexicon correctly in your vernacular.
Fair enough, I guess. It still feels strange to be this far in the future and there's just not that much more. Rick shrugged again.
Please elaborate.
There's no super tech. None of the items that we were researching or had in our stories of ridiculous technology that shouldn't work or wouldn't likely work within our lifetimes is also basic. The tech in that bay, sure there's a few things I couldn't read or maybe work, but it looked like a standard outpost. Other than the Xenos, there's nothing to really get excited about. Rix gesticulated rather vigorously at the region around them.
Is there a particular type of technology you would want to determine if it exists?
Mundo was connected to the Galnet and poised to search. Teleporters. I always wanted to see them make that work, Rix said without even a moment's hesitation.
Teleporters being translocation of a living being from one location to another without the organic being created and destroyed to eliminate an issue with semi-instantaneous cloning? Munto asked, skeptical already.
That's it. It's something I grew up with hearing about. They talked about making it possible with people within a few years of the colony. Rumours were the Flicks already had some prototypes they were able to send creatures through.
Munto provided several of the related search terms to a generic Galnet query mechanism. Quickly, Munto was inundated with all manner of fictional accounts of that particular type of technology. It was, in fact, not as simple as the Terran appeared to suggest, and while it was a common theme within the fictional accounts, no practical versions appeared to exist. You are correct that such technology does not appear to exist, Munto said, after a few minutes' worth of review.
See? I want to know what the Flicks managed. I'll bet they made it work, but that'd be even stranger since nobody else appears to have that kind of tech.
Do you have an alternate that is perhaps more likely? Munto requested.
Well, I mean, I know you exist, so that's something at least, Rick shrugged, and appeared to think a bit more. Has anyone built a Nivium or a Bronson sphere?
Munto felt utterly strange at finding neither as a reference within the lexicon, although they suspected that it had to do with the Terran's understanding of the concepts. I am unable to determine the base concept between either, so clarification is needed.
Megastructures. So big they encompass an entire star, Rick grinned, his eyes slightly glazed as though seeing such a thing within his own memory, only.
Munto ran a query for stellar-scale megastructures.
This too was met with significant quantities of fictional accounts, as well as a number of economics arguments by various species for and against the construction of such structures, relative to a perceived benefit or loss. One such economic argument considered the use of a complete stellar enclosure, channeling the enclosed energy into a means of powering computing structures capable of outclassing TASIS by several orders of magnitude, as well as providing a system with all the energy capacity you would need without any supplements or extraneous technologies. The counter to this was that such a stellar enclosure would severely impact the utilization of the system beyond the enclosure, and the enclosure itself would suffer severe issues, not only with material construction needed to complete such a task, but would likely require near constant adjustment to ensure that tidal forces and void debris did not impact the operation of such an enclosure. One group of beings approached the subject with an enclosure that was an incomplete variant, thereby significantly limiting the material costs, the logistics of support, and the impact to the system beyond. The rebuttal to this argument was that the cost-benefit ratio for such an endeavour would not be sufficient for a species to warrant taking the time and energy in creating such a structure, particularly when fusion systems were so common and so easy to maintain at the smaller level. This rebuttal even included the economic difficulties that were commonly experienced in attempting to maintain large fusion systems, let alone a stellar-sized one. The arguments appeared to devolve from scientific concerns to more personal and or species-centric concerns, but it had made its point. Due to the economics involved in the construction of most stellar enclosures, even partial ones, it does not appear that any have been made by any species on record, Munto told Rix. That's what I mean. It's weird, and frankly boring. In the midst of your contemplation of your place in the present time, compared with what was presupposed by the researchers and fictional accountants of your time, I've been given a menu of the food stores available from Blinn. She has indicated that she would appreciate gratitude in this gesture. Munto decided to shift the discussion, deciding to look around at technologies that may interest the Terran as being futuristic. Is this because I don't want mealworms? Rix asked, flashing the self-awareness rune, which didn't entirely fit, but the discrimination between that and the rune that Terran meant was to do with emotional context that Munto would have to revisit at a later time. In part, it appears that your rejection of sharing mealworms with her was perceived as rude, in conjunction with our request for an alternate menu, Munto said. I believe I was able to persuade her that it was also a matter of biocompatibility that we received the menu. I shouldn't like to accidentally have a nice big bowl of arsenic. Rix leaned forward and looked at the menu that Munto had just sent to the scroll. I do not have insight into your food systems. Is there a malfunction that I need to be aware of? Munto asked. Not exactly. It's just that it's a set menu with only a few months' worth of stocks. Rix scrolled, appearing to squint at various items. It is not equipped to mass repurposing systems? Munto was surprised to ask this, given how familiar the Terran had been with the portable printer and the mass scoop. Not on a ship the size of the Esperanto, maybe a destroyer size, but that's just a matter of logistics. Hard to pack several months' worth of rations on a ship that size. Most smaller ships just pack rations, though. Not even sure my reactor could run one if I had one, Rick said, appearing to be adding annotations to various items on the menu. Such as the portable printer and mass scoop that are currently connected to this vessel, Munto suggested. Rix looked up a moment and over at the walking frame. Yeah, something like that maybe. I guess we'd have to check and make sure we aren't going to run out of reaction mass trying to make me 6 meals a day. Plus we still have to figure out templates that work. Last time we tried we got raw meat and some kind of jerky. Might have been some kind of xenogoat by the taste. Rix cocked his head to one side. Do you not have a means of meal preparation? Munto pressed, having partially solved the issue internally thus far. Not on the Esperanto. They left that part of the galley off, so they had enough room for all the shielding. How is it then that I've seen you consume warm food and beverages? Chemical packs designed to provide concentrated thermal energy. They didn't even give me space for a radio reheater. I mean, I was only supposed to be on board for a month or so, and then they'd have moved me over to working station to service duty, so it wasn't going to matter in any case, Rick shrugged. Is the Esperanto rated for atmospheric flight? I am uncertain I would agree with an assessment that it is. Munto looked at the drives via a virtual side-eye. Nope, they were going to strip it down in orbit for parts, or have some boosters once we got here so I could land it and they could break it down for parts there. Riggs appeared to look longingly at the walls around the pair. Would this not pain you as the captain of this vessel? Munto asked, seeming to sense what the Terran wasn't expressing in runes. It would have, but it wasn't like my last ship, the Essentia. That was my baby. I wonder what happened to it, Riggs asked, thumbing the room for rhetorical question. Munto had already presupposed the Terran was asking a rhetorical question. The Terran was full of them, and truthful answers were rarely, if ever, welcome. The idea that this Essentia wasn't broken into its component pieces somewhere in years past, or otherwise utilized or lost, was infinitesimally unlikely, and Rix almost certainly knew this. Munto guessed that more of what Rix was asking was less about the ultimate fate of the vessel, and more about what manner of travels the ship had taken since he had relinquished it. To whom did you relinquish the vessel? Munto tried. A relative. She just graduated with her basic. I figured it would be best if the Essentia found its way with her, especially since I wouldn't be around to keep an eye on either of them. Rix's eyes glazed with memory. The pair sat in silence for a period of time. Why did you believe it to be unlikely that you would not see them again? Munto guessed. I lied before, Rix said quietly. Munto checked through their conversations with the Terran and tried to determine when or where the Terran had lied. About what? Munto asked. The trip was a lot longer before I crashed out, Rix said. By how much? Munto tried looking back through their stellar cartographic records, trying to guess just how far the Terran could have been coming from. 10 weeks. 10 weeks in real space time is not a substantial difference, Munto relayed. It was still a difference, but not the difference that the Terran was making it seem. 10 weeks in jump space, Rix corrected. Munto instantly started running the numbers, and everything the Terran had told them about the jump drive. 10 weeks in jump space at a near 1 to 10 ratio, Munto using the departure chronometer's differential with the attached station chronometer and adjusted for the timing provided by the jump drive systems to get a more exact measurement, equated to nearly 100 weeks in real space. Given further the semi-log function for long jumps, as far as Rix had described, in 11 weeks the Terran would have crossed the whole of acknowledged galactic society, crossing from the most distant colony of the Bintu to the homeworld and sol system of the Wirtik in a fraction of the time that such a journey should normally take, and experiencing far less than that time within the same degree of travel. It was staggering to even consider. Such a trip would have been nearly impossible for early FTL travel. Munto even calculated the standard number of jumps that would be required with conventional FTL to cross such a distance in an even reasonable amount of time. Why did you lie? Munto asked, still running numbers. Because it's what I told myself. If I didn't like it, it was only a week's trip back. It's what I told them all. Just going to go set up the new colony and I'll be back in a few years, Rick said, his voice still quiet, the normally moving hands seemingly frozen in position. Except you suffered an equipment failure, Munto commented, trying to make Rix feel better. There's no colony here. Never was, and they've never heard of Terrans. Means we never made it, Maybe it means nobody made it. Rix's voice seemed almost defeated.
How is that likely, given the significant degree of protection and effort placed into ensuring vessel operation? Muntel asked.
Practically zilch, except for one idea. Rix's voice seemed to take on a bit of edge in that moment. Munto kept silent, but flashed the elaboration requested rune. Sabotage.